Hello, Siddiqui sir.
Debashish, Dr. Giri, I'm here now.
Okay. So, sir, our Vice Chancellor sir and Registrar sir, they are busy.
Okay.
Let us start. Is it?
Okay,
Sir,
okay.
permission, we can start.
You mean I should actually start?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you see, our Vice Chancellor sir and Registrar sir, probably they are busy. They told
Okay.
us.
Okay, let me start and then you can continue.
Okay. So,
Okay.
Welcome and good morning to everybody. Good afternoon to everybody. I am Dr. Debashish Giri, Associate Professor in the Department of Information Technology, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad University of Technology, West Bengal. This is the fifth session of the webinar on cryptography, network security, and cyber security, jointly organized with the Islamic University of Science and Technology. They are always help to us for organizing such type of events. And today we are sorry that our honorable Vice Chancellor sir and Registrar sir, they are busy for your schedule. That is what they are unable to attend with the meeting. So now we are having the Vice Chancellor sir, Professor Mushtaq S. Siddiqui from Islamic University of Science and Technology, and our eminent speakers, Dr. Geoffroy Coteau, University of Paris, University of Paris, France, Dr. Jingwang Han, Queen's University, Belfast, UK, Mr. Vipin Dev Adat, University of Patras, Greece, and University of Vigo, Spain, and participants present. Now, I request to Professor Siddiqui sir to address the audience. Please, sir, you give you tell your views to the audience, sir.
Good morning and good afternoon to everybody. I think I don't know, there are participants from other countries too. So whether it's a good morning there or it's a good evening here, so let me say good day to all of you. Okay, let me again appreciate Professor Debashish Giri, that who has been organizing and putting a lot of efforts in organizing these webinars about the very pressing issues of cryptography and cybersecurity. So this is the fifth in the series, and I have participated in some of the technical lectures, and I'm really amused to know how the Maulana Azad University for the technical education as well as Islamic University are getting up to confront the issue of cybersecurity and through cryptography. So therefore, let me put on highest sense of appreciation to all the organizers of this. They deserve a congratulations from me, and thereafter I would definitely look forward to a technical lecture by some other members who are on the board today. And this area is really taking a huge significance, because we are now the new norm that has started in the whole world because of the COVID crisis. So everything has to be the new norm has to be on the digital platforms. So how important now it is to secure these digital platforms. Everybody, as even a consumer of this service, online services, is very understanding for them. So therefore, it's a very relevant one, and I again appreciate the university for doing it in collaboration with our university. So therefore, I'm looking forward for listening to the technical lectures of this. Thank you very much. It has been always pleasure to talk to highly talented scientists and the technologists in the area. So therefore, it's pleasure for me to be a part of this program also. With these words, I hand over back to Dr. Debashish Giri to carry forward the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your valuable talk to the audience. So now we are having the three speakers today. Now, first speaker is Dr. Geoffroy Coteau, University of Paris, France. He's a junior CNRS researcher in the algorithm and complexity terms of IRIF University de Paris, France. Previously, he received a PhD from ENS Paris, France, and was a postdoctoral researcher at KIT, Germany for 2 years. His main research interest includes secure multi-party communication, zero-knowledge proofs, and the foundation of cryptography. Now he will speak on efficient 2 rounds of extension and silent non-interactive secure communication. Now, Dr. Jeppat, you can start your presentation.
Thank you very much. So let me just share my screen. So where is it? This one. Nope. Yep, this one. So let me. Okay, let me try to put it. Okay, can you all see?
Yeah. This is visible. Okay, you can start.
Okay, so thanks, Dr. Debessis, for the introduction. So I'm Geoffroy Couteau. I'm a CNRS researcher at IRIF Université de Paris in France. And I'm going to talk today about my main subject of work, which is multi-party computation. And what I will describe belongs to a line of research that we started 3 to 4 years ago with my co-authors Eled Boyle, Niv Gilbora, Yuval Yishai, Lisa Cole, Peter Rindle, and Peter Shaw. So to start a bit this presentation, let me first explain to you what secure computation is. I don't know if you've heard of it. So classically in cryptography, the goal is to protect communication between individuals, meaning that you have individuals and they have message that they would like to exchange over some public network. And the goal is to make sure that no eavesdropper who's looking at the network can possibly read and learn those messages. However, something that is becoming increasingly more observed in today's world is that it does not suffice to protect data when it's used in communication, because our private data is nowadays extremely often used in computation. I'll give many examples, but anytime you're using social networks, anytime you're making research on Google and typing, I don't know, symptoms to a disease you think you have, anytime you're putting information about yourself to get some result, to get some answers, then you're actually sending your data over the web to get some computation done over this data. So the question of secure computation is whether it's possible to keep protecting the data, even though we want to use this data inside computation. So more generally, imagine the following setting. You do have some number of individuals, and they all hold some private data, and they would like, say, some powerful servers to compute something for them on this data. This can be, I don't know, some maybe they want this data are their private images, and they want the servers to classify their images according to some labels and stuff. The question is it possible to do so in a way that ensures that no one learns anything about the private data beyond the result that anyone is allowed to learn? So for example, if I define a protocol between me and Facebook, where I want Facebook to classify my images, so what I should learn from the protocol is the classified images, and what Facebook should learn is nothing. Is it possible to have a protocol where Facebook does the full classification for me and sends me back the result, yet Facebook never sees any of my private data, any of my images? So there are many. So secure computation, it's a very generic primitive. It's more like a generalization of standard cryptography, which ends up protecting communication. Now you want to protect arbitrary types of computations. So it has a number of applications. One of them that you might be aware of is e-voting. So here you have many individuals and they hold some private data, and this data is their vote. And now the function that all the individuals would like to evaluate is the result of the vote. Like typically, if you vote between two candidates, 0 or 1, then you want to know whether the sum of the votes is bigger than some threshold or not. So e-voting is one particular example of secure computation. Another one is auction, where all individuals have an auction in mind, and they would like to learn who won the auction without revealing what their secret auction was. Other examples are tax fraud detection, cloud computing, I mentioned that briefly. And a more recent application for this kind of questions is the issue of contact tracing, where all individuals have a private input, which is, for example, the list of where they went and at which time. And then the computation should indicate to each one whether there is a risk of exposure to someone who has the COVID-19 disease. So if you get a general solution for secure computation, something that allows you to securely compute any function, then you automatically get a general solution for all these applications and many more. So in this talk, I will focus into a very important subcase of secure multi-party computation, which is secure two-party computation, where we have two parties, Alice and Bob. Everything I will say can be at least partially generalized to the multi-party setting, but I currently focus on the two-party setting for the simplicity of exposition. So in this setting, multi-party computation states the following. Alice has some inputs x0, Bob has some input x1, and they communicate by exchanging messages interactively. And then at the end of the protocol, both parties should learn the output. And the output is a result of some function, f of x0, x1, f is public, evaluated on their joint input. But no party should be able to learn any additional information about the input of the other party beyond what can already be deduced from the output. So as you can see, this is a more strict setting than the standard setting of secure communication, because here the adversary is not only someone external that's observing the communication. The adversary can be even the party who's playing with you, because you want to jointly evaluate the function, but at the same time, this party should not learn anything beyond the output. And this party might cheat in the protocol to try to get more information. So the general question of whether secure computation is even feasible was asked for the first time in 1986 by Andrew Yao. And with the question came a positive answer. Andrew Yao described a general protocol that, under some cryptographic assumptions, can evaluate any polynomial time function. And the total secure computation protocol takes polynomial time for two parties. However, although it was a wonderful initial result that started all of this general field, the initial result of Andrew Yao is completely inefficient. It's a proof of concept, but if you were to use it in practice at the time, the protocols would run in reasonable time only for extremely small functions. So the main question left by the work of Andrew Yao, one of the main questions is, can we do better? Can we do secure computation for arbitrary functions in a way that lets us hope to use it later to evaluate real complex functions? And the core result that initiated the possibility of achieving efficient secure computation protocol was a result by Beaver in 1995. Sorry? Okay. So the result of Beaver in 1995 stated that it is possible to do secure computation of arbitrary function in the following particular model. This model is called the correlated randomness model. In this model, there is some trusted entity that comes and distributes random coins, correlated random coins, across all parties. So here, Alice and Bob initially receive some correlated random string K0 and K1 generated by some trusted entity. Then what Beaver observed is that if Alice and Bob initially receive those correlated random string in a trusted way, they can use it to securely evaluate any function. And actually, this protocol is extremely efficient. The protocol only requires a few very simple operations like XOR of bits for each gate of the Boolean circuit that represents a function, which was a huge improvement in efficiency compared to the result of a YAO. So nowadays, that's how we do secure computation. We divide a secure computation protocol in two phases. In the first phase, Alice and Bob will use some expensive secure computation protocol, for example, the one of Andrew Yao, and they will use it to securely evaluate the functionality that distributes this correlated randomness. So of course, here we've gained nothing. This is as expensive as it was initially. So it's a very long and very expensive phase. But the point is that this distribution of correlated randomness does not depend on the input. So it can be done ahead of time. Meaning that if I know that I want to do a secure computation protocol maybe in a year with one of you, we can start now to do this expensive preprocessing phase to securely generate correlated randomness and store it for later. And then later, when we want to actually evaluate the function, we can use these correlated random strings in what is called the online phase. This phase uses the input. And now the protocol will become extremely fast, quite efficient, and even information theoretically secure. So that was a great achievement. It still leaves the big problem that if I want to ever be able to do efficient secure computation, then I need at some point in the past to invest a huge computational effort to generate large quantities of correlated randomness. And then I need to store all of this correlated randomness for as long as I need until we do the actual protocol. And just to give you a sense of how expensive this can be, if you want to evaluate some very simple function, say, for example, the function that computes the edit distance, also called Levenshtein distance, between two strings. So this distance is computed by counting the number of change of symbol or swapping of moving around that you need to do between two strings so that they become equal. So it's a very common function to use in genomics. So if you want to privately do some genome comparison, which is an important problem, then you want to use this function. Now, suppose you only want to compute the edit distance between two strings that are 4,000 bits long. Then the amount of preprocessing material that you need for that with the method of Beaver is in the order of 200 gigabytes. So the point is, even for simple functions, even though you get an efficient online phase, the amount of computation you need to do and the amount of material you need to store beforehand makes this protocol essentially infeasible in practice. So what I'm going to discuss in the rest of these talks is how we address this problem, a long line of work, and how we try to bring secure computation much closer to practice by finding new methods to do those preprocessing correlated randomness generation, so this preprocessing phase, without having those huge costs. So just to make this a bit more concrete, let me give you a concrete example of what I mean when I talk about sharing correlations. So an important kind of a primitive in secure computation, and a very, very simple one, is called the Oblivious transfer correlation. So OT for short. So in an OT, what we have is Bob, which is some sender who knows, say, 2 bits, A0 and A1. And what we want is that Alice learns one of those bits, but not the other. So Bob wants that Alice can only learn a single of the 2 bits, but Alice does not want to tell Bob which bits she wants to learn. So at the end of the protocol, in the protocol, Bob inputs 2 bits A0, A1, Alice inputs a bit B. And at the end of the protocol, we want that Alice gets the bit A underscore B. Okay, and Bob should learn nothing. So there is a correlation equivalent to this very simple secure computation functionality. And the equivalent correlation that you can see with a simple transformation is the following. We want Alice to receive 2 values, C1 and B, and Bob to receive two values, C0 and A, so that if you XOR C1 and C0, so Alice knows one of them and Bob knows the other, then you get the end of the two other values. So this is what I mean when I say, when I talk about correlated random string. This is one very simple and very useful example. My correlated random string will be pairs of 2 bits for each parties, where the XOR of the first 2 bits is the end of the last 2 bits. Okay. Now, a very famous result by Goldreich, Micali, and Witgerson in 1987 is that if you get a lot of these simple correlation, then you can evaluate any function. When I mean a lot, what do I mean? Well, take the function you want to evaluate and represent it as a Boolean circuit. So if you're familiar with hardware, Boolean, yes? Is there a question? So if you're familiar with hardware, a Boolean circuit is a sequence of logical operations such as XOR or AND or negation or NAND and so on, applied to the bits of the entry. And we know that any function can be computed by some Boolean circuits because that's essentially how your computer evaluates a function. So the protocol works, so the result says that you can take any function, then you convert it into a Boolean circuit. We know how to do that. And for any AND gate, so for any product gate which is contained in this Boolean circuit, if you use 2 instances of this Oblivious transfer protocol, then you can securely evaluate this gate. So essentially, we know that we can do secure computation by distributing many correlated Oblivious transfer correlations. So pairs of bits where the XOR of the first 2 is the end of the last 2. Whereas the number of such pairs that we need to distribute is 2 times the number of AND gates in the function that we want to evaluate. So this is a very nice result, and I'm not going to prove it. So I'm going to ask you to assume this for now. It will take too much time to reprove it from scratch. But this is kind of our starting point. This is nice, but Oblivious transfer, it's a bit expensive because it requires public key cryptography. So if some of you are familiar with public key cryptography, standard public key cryptography primitives use operations such as what we have in RSA. So for example, exponentiation modulo some product of 2 very large primes, or discrete logarithm problems, so exponentiation in elliptic curve groups. And all those are very expensive operations. If I want to do exponentiation over a large elliptic curve, say the elements are 200 bits long, and if I need to do many of those exponentiation for each gate of my circuit, then since even a simple circuit can have billions of gates, my computation will be huge. So the next question was, how can we do this Oblivious transfer much more quickly without using those expensive public key operations for each gate of our circuit? And the result here is again a nice result by Beaver. So I mentioned that Beaver in 1995 had invented this correlated randomness model. And then 1 year later, Beaver in 1996 had the wonderful idea that it's actually possible to extend Oblivious transfers. What does that mean? Well, it means that if I want to do many Oblivious transfer, which is the case in any secure computation protocol, because I want to do one for each, 2 of them, sorry, for each gate of my circuit. Then Beaver observed that it is sufficient to do a small fixed number of Oblivious transfer, where fixed is some security parameter, think 80 or 128. So you do that once, and then you use only efficient cryptographic techniques like evaluating hash functions, so much more efficient than computing exponentiation over elliptic curves, to transform all those, this small number of Oblivious transfers into a very large number of Oblivious transfers. This protocol is called the Nobleuse transfer extension. And it was inefficient, the first protocol. But I mean, the first idea that you had to do that does not work very well. But a few years later, in 2003, Ishai et al. Devised a way to make this approach actually extremely more efficient, to reduce the cost for each OT to only 3 evaluations of a hash function. So evaluating 3 times the hash functions, that's something your computer can do extremely fast. So now, how secure computation proceeds nowadays? You take the function Alice and Bob wants to evaluate, you convert it into a Boolean circuit, and then Alice and Bob use some elliptic curve cryptography-based protocol or some RSA-based protocol to do oblivious transfers, to do, say, 80 of them. Then they use this protocol of Ishai et al. To transform these 80 oblivious transfers into a very large number of oblivious transfers. And then they use a GMW protocol to securely evaluate the function they want to evaluate using those oblivious transfers. This is a template that all secure computation protocols nowadays follow. And there are many secure computation protocols around. Some have been deployed in the wild. Some have been used in a bunch of real world situations in various countries. And they all follow this approach. The problem is that even though that's a great improvement, this is still a lot of communication. So it's much less computation because it's just evaluating a few hash functions. But to do these extensions, Alice and Bob still need to communicate a huge number of bits. Again, the same example as before holds. If you wanted to evaluate the Levenstein distance, you would have to exchange something of the order of 200 gigabytes to evaluate the Levenstein distance between 4,000 bit strings, which is something your computer does in nanoseconds. I mean, computing it without security. Exchanging 200 gigabytes is not something your computer does in nanoseconds. So the problem is still that when we do this oblivious transfer extension, the communication is always linear in the number of oblivious transfers that we want to generate. So the question we ask is it possible to have much less communication than that? And ideally, is it possible to have a communication in a storage which is sublinear, so much smaller than the number of oblivious transfers that we want to produce in the end? Okay. So I'm going to explain how to do that. And this is the main contribution of our sequence of work. It's not an easy problem. So it's something that has been partially solved over the years. So the starting point is one of the most common and famous cryptographic primitives. You might, maybe most of you might have heard of it. It's called a pseudorandom generator. So what is a pseudorandom generator? It's a function that takes as input some short seed and transforms this short seed into a very long string. So it expands the short seed. And the pseudorandom generator satisfies the following security property. If you pick a random string and then you, a random seed, so a random very short string, and then you expand it to a very long string, then this expanded string is pseudorandom in the sense that no adversary, no efficient algorithm, meaning no algorithm that runs in polynomial time, can possibly distinguish this string from a truly random string of the same size. So formally, for all probabilistic polynomial time adversary A cannot distinguish between the following two scenarios. In the first scenario, A receives a random strings of length m, and in the second scenario, A receives the output of the pseudorandom generator on a random short seed. So pseudorandom generators are used everywhere. That's essentially the way you do secure, I mean, that's essentially equivalent for some who are more familiar with that to stream ciphers. So each time someone encrypts data over the web with a stream cipher, this is essentially applying a pseudorandom generator to encrypt the data. So now the core primitive that we try to build in order to solve this major issue of secure computation, in order to be able to do secure computation of arbitrary function, but with very little communication in the preprocessing phase, We do so by devising a primitive which is called a pseudorandom correlation generator. So remember that I told you that the main thing we want to do in secure computation is to securely distribute random strings between the parties which are correlated. And remember that a pseudorandom generator allows you to transform a very small seed into a long string that looks random. So we ask the following: would it be possible to have a very special kind of pseudorandom generator that takes as input a seed and expands it into a long pseudorandom string, but so that if you have two short but correlated seeds, and then you expand them into long correlated strings, those strings, they individually look random. So S0 looks random from the viewpoint of Alice, and S0 looks random from the viewpoint of Bob, and S1 looks random from the viewpoint of Alice. Yet S0 and S1 are guaranteed to satisfy the right correlation that we want. So if you followed until there, it should not be too hard to convince yourself that this would help a lot to solve the problem we want to solve, because instead of securely distributing huge correlated random strings, now what you can do is just you securely distribute two short correlated seeds. And then if the party wants to generate correlated random strings, for example, using this Oblivious transfer correlation that I described, then they can just apply a pseudorandom correlation generators locally. So they never need to interact anymore. They don't need to meet each other or to send messages online. They just retrieve from their storage a short random seed, and they expand it to a long random looking string, which is guaranteed to satisfy the target correlation with the long random string obtained by the other party. Okay. So in the rest of this talk, I will define more formally what this primitive is, and I will explain how we can construct it. And then I'll discuss a bit other open questions, other applications of these questions, and other interesting problems related to this line of work. So, but the main feature, I already said it, but the main feature I wanted to insist on for pseudorandom correlation generators is that the entire generation of those long correlated strings is silent, in the sense that it requires no communication or interaction between the parties. The only interaction is a very small secure computation protocol to securely generate those correlated seeds at the beginning. So that's why we call the kind of protocols that we obtain this way silent secure computation protocols. So formally, what's the definition of a pseudorandom correlation generator? So a pseudorandom correlation generator for a relation rel. So the relation rel is a relation that tells you for two strings whether they satisfy or not the target relation that you want. So a pseudorandom correlation generator for such a relation is a pair of efficient algorithm, a generation algorithm gen, that generates a pair of seeds K0 and K1, and an expansion algorithm, so that if you apply this expansion algorithm expand to K0, you obtain the string R0 here. And if you apply it to K1, you obtain the string R1 here. And then we want two properties. The first one is that the two strings that Alice and Bob obtain this way, they do satisfy the right relation. Actually, they look like a random string conditioned and satisfying this relation. And then the security states the following. From the viewpoint of Alice, and so Alice knows K0 because that's what she receives in the protocol. The string that Bob obtains, so this R1, it looks like a uniformly random string that will have been sampled, conditioned on satisfying the right relation with R0. So what this means is that from the viewpoint of Alice, Alice knows, of course, that her own string R0 was generated from this short K0, so she knows that R0 is not random. But what Bob got from her viewpoint cannot be distinguished from just a random string which is correlated in the right way with her string. And this is a crucial security requirement that we want. And of course, we also want the symmetric requirement that states that Bob cannot distinguish R0 from a random string sampled condition and satisfying the right relation with R1. Okay. So the first question that will come to mind is, okay, we have this definition, and can we use these pseudorandom correlation generators directly as a drop-in replacement to the preprocessing phases that we did in the past for secure computation? And so in some of our work, we've shown actually a bunch of impossibility results. So there are actually secure computation protocols, which are quite artificial, which are secure if you use truly correlated random strings. But if you put instead those pseudo-random correlated strings, then the protocol security breaks down. So that sounds bad, but we showed that for a certain class of protocols, which are called corruptible functionalities, then actually replacing the correlated randomness generation by a pseudorandom correlation generator leads to a secure protocol. And it turns out that all existing protocols that exist in the real world and that I'm aware of in the literature are corruptible protocols, because it's a feature that's useful for many other things and that's usually very easy to achieve. So luckily, it's a feature that's already shared by all existing protocols I'm aware of. So for now, we wish to build such pseudorandom correlation generators, and if we have one, we know that we can use as a drop-in replacement for the preprocessing phase in essentially all real-world protocols. Okay, so the goal, I said, is to generate many Oblivious transfer correlation. So I recall an Oblivious transfer correlation. It's a pair of bits for Alice and a pair of bits for Bob, where the XOR of the first bit in Alice and the first bit of Bob is the end of the second bit of Alice and the second bit of Bob. And we want to generate many, many such pairs using a minimal amount of communication, like much less than the number of pairs. So I will first try to address, a simpler case where we fix one of the bits of, we fix the bit of Alice, meaning that Alice has a single bit, a single second part. And what we want is to generate many tuples of value where Alice gets 1 bit, Bob gets 2 bits, and the XOR of the bit Alice gets with the first bit Bob's get is the end of Bob's bit together with always the same bit of Alice. This one never changes. So those are called correlated Oblivious transfer, because this is many Oblivious transfer where one of the bits of Alice is forced to be always the same across all executions. So we write that with a big vector of value deltas for Bob, but a single bit bi for Alice. And the reason why we can focus on this correlated Oblivious transfer instead of looking at the more general case is that essentially, if at the end your values have this kind of correlations, so one of the bits of Alice is forced to be always the same, actually just by hashing your outputs, it has been shown by Ishai et al. In 2003 in these papers that introduced Oblivious transfer extension, efficient Oblivious transfer extension. So it has been shown that if you hash all your outputs with what's called a correlation robust hash function, you get a standard Oblivious transfer correlation. So we can simply look at the simpler case of correlated Oblivious transfer, and we get the same outcome. So to reflect the problem, what we want is to generate big vectors Q, R, and delta, sorry, Q, R, and B, such that Alice gets Q, Bob gets R, Alice gets also B, Bob has also, sorry, Bob has also a single bit delta. And if we XOR the vectors Q and R, we get the vector B times the single bit delta, or the single value delta. We can generalize that over an arbitrary field. So again, we want pair of long vectors for Alice and Bob, such that their XOR is the product between 1 bit held by one of the parties and the long vector held by the other party. And we want these vectors to be pseudorandoms. So they should look random from the viewpoint of all other parties. And this should use minimal communication. So how can we do that? The strategy proceeds in three steps. So the roadmap is the following. First, I will explain how we can generate long vectors Q and R such that their XOR is vector times a small delta, like that, with a very small communication in the simple case where B is a unit vector. So remember that at the end, what I want is that Q, R, B, and delta are all random, like pseudo-random. For now, I suppose that Q and R will be pseudo-random, but B is just a random unit vector. It's 0 everywhere, except at a single coordinate. And delta is just a random field element. So I will show how we can devise a pseudorandom correlation generator for this kind of unit vectors using a standard cryptographic primitive, which is called a puncturable pseudorandom function. Then I will show how we can go from this kind of correlation for unit vector B for the same kind of correlation, but where now B is sparse, meaning that it has a small number of non-zero coordinates, but it can be more than one. And then I will explain how we can use results from coding theory to transform such a pseudorandom correlation generator for a sparse B into a pseudorandom correlation generator for a general pseudorandom B. So what's a puncturable pseudorandom function, which is what we need in the first step of this construction? So a pseudorandom function, it's a function, it's a keyed function, which is indistinguishable from a truly random function via black box access. So that means the following: if I sample my function fk, so I sample the key k and the key determines the function, then you cannot distinguish, I mean, no adversary who has access to the function can distinguish this function from a truly random function. So pseudorandom function, we know that they can be built from any one-way functions. That's a very similar results in cryptography. And again, they are essentially equivalent to string ciphers, so or even block ciphers. So think of a pseudorandom function as a way to have a function where the outputs always look random. And we can build that from, for example, AES. So it's a very simple primitive. Now we say that a pseudorandom function is puncturable if there is, in addition, a possibility to generate keys that allow to evaluate the function everywhere except at a single point. So in a puncturable pseudorandom function, I can generate a key that allows you to compute it entirely except for a single special x, where the key leaks nothing about f of x. And this, again, we know can be constructed, say, from any block cipher, stream cipher, or even one-way function. This is done using a celebrated construction by Goldreich, Goldwasser, and Micali from the 90s. So maybe I'm not going to go over the entire construction, but the idea is that you can start from a pseudorandom generator, so say a stream cipher, and if you want to evaluate the function on an input x, then you first take your key, make it twice longer using the pseudorandom generator. Then if the first bit of x is 0, you take the first of the two parts. And if it's 1, you take the second part. So then you go down one step in a tree. Then you take the part you've left. You again make it twice longer with the pseudorandom generator. And with the second bit of x, you choose one of the two parts, and so on. So essentially, evaluating the function is finding a path in a complete binary tree. And now the observation is that if we give the co-path of a path to a very specific xx from the domain of the pseudorandom function, then this co-path allows to evaluate the function everywhere except at this single point. So that's as a general idea. I won't go into details over how it works, but the main point is that it can be done very efficiently. It's just you take AES and then you apply it a linear number of times in the number of bits of your inputs. So it's something that can be done extremely fast. Now the core idea is that it's possible for Alice and Bob to generate those Q and R such that their XOR is a long vector, which is a unit vector times some value delta, using a puncturable pseudorandom function. How is it possible? Well, what we give to Bob is the key K of a pseudorandom function and the value delta. So the key is small and the value delta, it's random and it's small. Then Alice gets the punctured key star, which is punctured at the position alpha. And then she gets the evaluation fk of alpha XORed with delta. So this is still small. So what we see is that the two parties get a very small amount of information, something much smaller than the size of the domain of the pseudorandom function. Now Alice and Bob will locally evaluate the pseudorandom function on the entire domain. So for all x from 1 to n, where n is some bound on the number of correlations they want to produce in the end. So this way Alice gets some vector q and Bob gets some vector r. And of course, Alice cannot know the position, the value at position alpha, but she replaces this value at position alpha by the value fk of alpha plus delta that she knows. Now the core observation is that their two vectors are the same everywhere, because except at 1 and 3, because k star and k, they compute the same values except at the values where k star was punctured. So Alice and Bob obtained the same vectors except for one position where their value differ by delta, because Alice there has put fk of alpha plus delta and Bob there has put fk of alpha. So this means that now if you XOR those two vectors, what you obtain is a vector which is 0 everywhere except at the position alpha where it's equal to delta. So as you can see, what you obtain is exactly the correlation we want. Alice and Bob obtain Q and R, so that if you XOR them, you get the unit vector B, which is 0 everywhere, except at some random position alpha known only to Alice, times the value delta, which is a random field element known only to Bob. Okay. So summing up, with a few simple applications of an AES and using some known construction, it turns out that you can do those pseudorandom correlation generators, but for unit vectors. So now suppose I want to do a bit better. In this correlation in the bottom, I want B to be a sparse vector. I want it to have to be random, but conditioned on having like almost everywhere zeros, but a few random ones. Say T of them for some fixed number T that I have in my mind. Well, the way we do that is simply by repeating T times the previous protocol and XORing the outputs. So everything is perfectly linear in what I described. So if Alice and Bob generates T of those pairs QR and B times delta, then by XORing everything with the same delta everywhere, what they get is a new Q and a new R, so that if you XOR them, you get delta times a vector which is the sum of the unit vectors, so as represented here, and the sum of T unit vectors, of T random unit vectors, is essentially a random sparse vector with T non-zero coordinates. I mean, close to T non-zero. The distribution is not exactly that, but that's essentially that. So now we know how to do pseudorandom correlation generators for this correlation that we want, but only when B is very sparse. How can we go from there to an arbitrary B? The main idea is to rely on a cryptographic assumption, which is called syndrome decoding, or you might also have heard of it under the name learning parity with noise. What is learning parity with noise? It's the following assumption. Suppose you want to solve a system of linear equations. So here's the big pink rectangle is some public matrix. And then there is some secret, which is a small gray vector. And if you multiply this matrix times this vector, you get some system of linear equations. So if we want to solve such a system, we know how to do it efficiently using a Gaussian elimination. So the standard Gauss algorithm for solving a system of linear equation. However, as soon as you add a very tiny little bit of noise to your data, to the system of linear equation, of random noise, all known strategies to solve the linear system seem to break down. And it's a widely studied problem. So we don't know how to solve a linear system of equation if there is a little bit of random noise on the data. So not over the rails. Over the rails, we know how to do that. But if we are over a field and the noise is some sparse noise, which is 0 almost everywhere, but completely random at some position, then all known techniques to solve such a system, they take an exponential amount of time in the number of noise that you've put. And so the learning parity with noise assumption is a cryptographic assumption that says essentially that actually it's not possible to solve such a system in polynomial time. By a simple transformation, it's possible to see that this assumption is equivalent to another assumption, which is the hardness of decoding a random linear code. So for those of you who have heard a bit of coding theory, you have a big compressing public matrix H, you multiply it by a sparse vector, and then you get some smaller output, and then you must find a sparse preimage through a public matrix H, or distinguish the output from random. Those are equivalent. This is the problem of decoding a random linear code, because this will be using the syndrome of the code to find the errors in the message you received. And this has been studied in coding theory since the 70s. And again, it's conjectured to be impossible to solve. And actually, it's an assumption that is even believed to be secure even against quantum computers. And so it has been used in the past years as a basis to construct many candidate post-quantum crypto systems that have been submitted to the standardization competition to construct crypto system resistance to quantum attacks. So all in all, this is a very well-established assumption in cryptography. So now what do? We generate this Q and R using T repetitions, as I said before, of our protocol for unit vector B using a puncturable pseudorandom function. And we get Q and R, which are equal to B times delta, where B is sparse. And now we multiply everything by some big random public matrix H. So it's a random matrix, but it's fixed and known to everyone. So not something that you need to preserve secretly. And it's by the linearity of the matrix product and the linearity of addition and everything. If you do this, the new values you obtain, they still satisfy the relation Q plus R is B times delta, where B now is the product between your previous B and this matrix H. But on top of that, by the syndrome decoding assumption, this B that you obtain by taking a random sparse vector B and multiplying it by a public random matrix H, this B now really looks like a random vector. I mean, if you could distinguish this B from a random vector, then you will break the syndrome decoding assumption and solve a major open problem in coding theory and cryptography. So wrapping up, to obtain this pseudorandom correlation generator, we do T parallel generations of pseudorandom correlation generator for unit vectors, uses this puncturable pseudorandom functions. And then we sum and multiply by public matrices to make all the vector dense. And we get a secure pseudorandom correlation generator for this correlated.t functionality, whose security probably reduces to the security of the syndrome decoding problem. And then, as I told you in the end, if you want to go from correlated.t to standard Oblivious transfer, so the actual correlation we want in the end, you just hash everything. There are minor technical details that I'm hiding here, but it's not very important. From there are many interesting questions. So typically, can we make this more efficient? So there are several ideas. One is to use stronger assumptions. So typically, if we use an assumption which is called the regular syndrome decoding assumption, we don't have to do T huge unit vectors, which take time to generate using this puncturable pseudorandom function, but we can just concatenate T much smaller unit vectors, because the regular syndrome decoding assumption states that we still have the same security as before if instead of taking a random sparse noise, we take noise where we divide the vector in blocks, and there is one noisy coordinate in each block. So this significantly improves the efficiency. And a second improvement is that the big matrix vector multiplication, well, it takes a lot of time, because in the real world, the number of vector things you might want to produce is in the millions. So your matrix can be of the size of the million squared, like millions times millions. So evaluating a matrix product with such a huge matrix is costly, but actually you can use a quasi-cyclic matrix, which still leads to a very conservative and well-studied assumption. And now the product takes a quasi-linear time, so it's considerably more efficient. I won't have time to go over that, but the next step, once you know that you can do a pseudorandom correlation generator, is to say, okay, if my two parties have those two short seeds, they don't need to interact anymore, and they can generate a huge amount of reprocessing material and then securely compute any function. Now, how do they obtain in the first place those very short seeds? Well, for that, we show that there is an extremely efficient protocol, which takes just 2 rounds. It uses, again, IDs that go through the co-pass of a well-chosen binary tree. And that gives an optimal in terms of round complexity. So 2 rounds of interaction. Alice sends a single message, which is quite small. Bob sends a second message, which is quite small. And then they locally both compute their seed. And another thing I've not discussed is that here I've discussed what happens when all the parties just follow the rules, like they play along and follow the protocol. And we can provably show in this scenario that everything is as secure as the syndrome decoding assumption. And actually, there are clever ways to add some specific consistency checks to this generation protocol to make sure that even if the parties cheat completely, even if they deviate arbitrarily from the specification of the protocol, then the resulting protocol will still be secure. So just in case you're interested into seeing how that compares to the state of the art. So what we knew how to do before was, so if you want to do secure computation, before we wanted to generate, say, a few millions or a few billions correlated random bits. With the initial protocol of Beaver in 1996, we only had a way to do that with a lot of communication and with some polynomial amount of communication. No clear bound on what it is. It was just a feasibility result. Then later results showed that 128 bits of communication per Oblivious transfer suffices. This was lowered in some specific cases to 78 bits per Oblivious transfers that you want to generate. But remember, we want to generate million of those. So 78 times million, it's still a lot. And so in our sequence of results, so in a sequence of 2 papers, we've reduced this to less than 1/10 of a bit per Oblivious transfers that you want to generate, and using a minimal number of rounds under this learning parity with noise assumption. So it's a protocol that people are starting to implement and started to use and to optimize in a bunch of real world applications and in a bunch of proof of concept secure computation protocols. And essentially, it can improve the overall the overall communication of existing secure computation protocol by a factor of 30 or so. It would improve by a factor more if you were to compute a much bigger function, but the factor of 30 is for function of a reasonably standard size. So this work left open many super cool problems. So I mentioned at the beginning of the talk that I was going to only discuss the case of computation between two parties. So question, can this be extended to more parties? This is still essentially open, though we've achieved progress this year with so my co-authors, Elliot Boyle, Niv Gilboa, Yuval Ishai, Lisa Cole, and Peter Shaw. That shows on some preliminary results about how this can be extended to the multi-party setting at a reasonable cost. Here I told you that to compute this, you can use this quasi-cyclic matrix to compute this pseudorandom correlation generator, and that this takes quasi-linear time. So what if you want to be more efficient? What if you want to be linear time? So that's ongoing work, and it's related to very interesting problems in the existence of how to decode linear time, linear codes, which is a very cool problem in coding theory. Another question is whether we can get pseudorandom correlation functions. So those will be like pseudorandom correlation generators, but they can be used an arbitrary amount of time. So you don't generate just fixed long correlated random string. You can just keep reusing them again and again to generate pseudorandom strings as long as you want. And this we solved extremely recently in a Fox paper, but the solution relies on a new assumption and is still not extremely efficient. Making it more efficient or being able to base it on a more standard assumption is a very cool open problem. And then there is a question of doing all of that over large fields. So I mainly discussed about bits, but if you want to compute functions which naturally operate, I don't know, over a bigger field of typically if they directly manipulate machine words, so 32 bits words, then you want an extension of that to the case of large fields. This is something we could solve in a recent crypto paper, albeit by using kind of a stronger assumption, which is called the ring learning parity with noise assumption, and basing that on the most standard version, the learning parity with noise assumption, is also still a cool open problem, and one that can have some other applications. Okay, that's about all for my talk. Now, if you have any question, I'd be happy to answer them.
So any question from the audience? Any question from the participants? Any question, please? You can write in the chat box. There is one chat box. You have any question, then you can write.
Also, I mean, if there are questions that come along the way later on about this talk, I can also answer them directly by responding, by writing the answer in the Q&A.
Okay, so participant, you can later on you can send the mail to him if you have any questions. Now, thank you, Dr. Jeffroy, for your valuable speech, and I'm sure that will be helpful to our participants. Thank you, and we are thankful that you have spent your time for about 1 hour for the pandemic situation. So thank you very much, Jeffroy.
You're welcome. Thanks to you.
So now our next speaker, Dr. Jingwang Han. He obtained his PhD degree from the University of Wollongong, Australia in 2013. He is a lecturer in Center of Security Information Technology, Institute of Electronics Communication and Information Technology, Queen's University, Belfast. His research topic includes access control, applied cryptography, blockchain, cloud computing, and etc. He is a senior member of IEEE and a member of ACM and IACI. Now he will speak today on anonymous single sign on for a design service with traceability. So Dr. Han, you can continue your speech. You are welcome to start your speech.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it is visible. Dr. Han, it is visible.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Giro, for your kind invitation. Today is my pleasure to give a presentation entitled Anonymous Single Sign-On for Undesignated Service with Traceability. I'm Jingguang Han. I'm a lecturer in Center for Secure Information Technology, Queen's University, Belfast. This is my today's agenda. I will first introduce some background on the related work. Then I introduce the overview of our scheme and some preliminary which used to construct our scheme. Finally, I will introduce the construction of our scheme, the security of our scheme, and also the implementation. As you know, single sign-on sorted for SSO system, user-friendly system, which enable users to access multiple services using only one credential. So single sign-on can be used to reduce the burden of managing password and the username. We have had some very efficient and practiced single sign-on system, including an OpenID, Kerberos, and also Samos. All these systems are very practical. Considering the privacy issue in single sign-on system, some anonymous single sign-on system were proposed to protect the user's personal information, especially the personal identifiable information, so for PII. This is quite important because the General Data Protection Regulation, so for GDPR, announced in 2018, asked industry to give personal information control to individuals. So we should consider the user's privacy in a single sign-on system. Although anonymous single sign-on can protect the user's personal identifiable information, but there are still some issues in existing anonymous single sign-on system. The first issue is users' service requests were not protected. Even the user's personal identifiable information was considered, but user's service requests have not been considered in existing scheme. The second issue is multiple service provider can collaborate to conclude the user's personal information from their service request. For example, service provider can conclude the user's workplace, user's health information, and their commercial partner from service request, because we have machine learning technique which can be used to conclude the user's information from some public information. So it's quite important to protect the user's service request. So to protect the user's privacy in single sign-on system, both users' personal identifiable information and the user's service request should be considered. To solve the mentioned problems, we propose the new anonymous single sign-on system for undesignated service with traceability scheme. Our scheme can provide some new features. The first feature is to access multiple services, only one ticket is used. The second feature is user can obtain a ticket from the ticket issuer anonymously without revealing the personal identifiable information to the ticket issuer. The third feature is the verifier can determine whether a user is authorized to access its service, but cannot link the user's service request, even multiple verifier could. The fourth feature is verifier can detect and prevent double spending ticket, but cannot de-anonymize users. The fifth feature is, if required, a central verifier can de-anonymize users and trace their service request. So this is the feature provided by our new scheme. Especially, we formalized the definition of the new anonymous single sign-on system, and also we give the formal security model of this system. And we also reduce the security of the proposed scheme to some well-known complexity assumptions. And also we implement and evaluate this scheme. There's some related work to our scheme. The first related work is named the anonymous single sign-on scheme. As mentioned before, in an anonymous single sign-on scheme, a user can anonymously access multiple services by using one credential. So we have had some very famous anonymous single sign-on scheme, but our scheme is quite different from existing anonymous single sign-on system. The first difference is the access right. In existing scheme, an authorized user can access all services in the system, except the scheme proposed in the reference 5. However, in our scheme, an authorized user can only access the selected service instead of all services in the system. The second difference is traceability. In existing scheme, the traceability of a user service request were not considered, except the scheme proposed in the reference 6. In our scheme, traceability is considered. The third difference is the designated verifier property. In existing scheme, user can authenticate to any service provider to access the service, except the scheme proposed in the reference 5. However, in our new scheme, user can only authenticate to the designated service provider and access the service provided by this service provider. So this is the difference between our scheme and the existing anonymous single sign-on system. The second related work is named the K-time anonymous authentication scheme, shorted for KTAA. In a KTAA scheme, a user can anonymously authenticate to a verifier at most K times. Otherwise, the user can be de-anonymized. The difference between our scheme and the KTAA scheme are as follows. The first difference is in existing KTAA scheme, an authentication is not bound with a verifier. In other words, the user can authenticate to any verifier in the system. However, in our scheme, an authentication is bound with a designated verifier. So the user can to the designated verifier instead of any verifier in the system. The second difference is existing KTA scheme, a verifier can de-anonymize a double subordinate user. However, in our scheme, only the central verifier can de-anonymize user. The verifier cannot de-anonymize the user. The third difference is in our scheme, the central verifier can also trace a user's whole service provider, or the whole the central verifier can trace the user's whole service request. This property has not been considered by KTAA scheme. The third related work is named the multi-coupon scheme. As you know, in a multi-coupon scheme, a user can redeem a multi-coupon to different vendor anonymously. The difference between our new scheme and the existing multi-coupon scheme as follows. The first difference is in existing scheme, authentication is not bound with the verifier. In other words, a user can redeem to any service provider in existing multi-coupon scheme. However, in our scheme, the user can only authenticate to the designated verifiers. The second difference is any verifier in existing multi-coupon scheme can de-anonymize a double-subordinate user. However, in our scheme, only the central verifier can de-anonymize users instead of any verifier. Especially in our scheme, the verifier can detect double-subordinate user but cannot de-anonymize the user. The fourth difference is in our scheme, the central verifier can trace the user's whole service request, but this property has not been considered in existing multi-coupon schemes. The fourth related work to our scheme is named the designated verifier signature scheme. As you know, designated signature provides a good property, which means the verifier can also generate the signature by himself. So the verifier cannot release a signature to others because the verifier can generate the signature by himself. But in our scheme, anyone can check the signature generated by the ticket issuer for an authenticated attack, but cannot know the tag is generated for whom except the designated verifier. In other words, in our scheme, the signature can be verified by any party in the system, but only the designated verifier can know whether the tag is generated for him or not. So this is quite different between our scheme and the designated verifier scheme. This is the whole structure of our scheme. There are some entities in our scheme, including the central authority, ticket issuer, user, ticket verifier, and a special entity named the central verifier. Our scheme works as follows. At the beginning, the central authority set up the system, but generate some public parameter on the master secret key of the system. Then all the entity in the system need registered to the central authority, and obtain a credential from the central authority. When buying a ticket, a user first form a site GU, which consists of the identity of selected service provider, and the user sends all the selected service provider to the ticket issuer. Then the ticket issuer will generate a ticket for the user. Actually, the ticket consists of some tags which are generated for the selected service provider. When using a ticket, the user first selected the tag, which can only be verified by the verifier, and sent the tag to the verifier. After this, after obtaining the tag from the user, the verifier can use his secret key to check the validity of the tag. If it is valid, the ticket verifier will grant the request to the user. Otherwise, the user's service request will be denied. In the case, if the user needs to be de-anonymized and traced, the central verifier can use his secret key to de-anonymize user and trace her whole service request. So this is the whole structure of our anonymous single sign-on for undesignated service with traceability scheme. To prove the security, we also formalized the definition of this scheme. The form definition is as follows. This consists of some algorithm. At the beginning, the central authority set up the system, and then all the entity in the system need registered to the central authority. After the registration, its entity obtains a credential from the central authority. So when buying a ticket, the user needs to prove to the ticket verifier that she is a legal user in the system because she has an anonymous credential from the central authority, and then send the selected service provider identity to the ticket issuer. Then the ticket issuer will generate a ticket for the user. When using a ticket, the user needs to send the corresponding tag to the designated verifier. The designated verifier will use his secret key to check whether the ticket, whether the tag is valid or invalid, and whether the tag has been used or not. In the case if the user needs to be de-anonymized and traced, the central authority can use his secret key to de-anonymize user and trace the user from the user ticket. So this is the formal definition of our scheme. For the correctness of our scheme, we consider the following two cases. If the system is correctly set up and its entity is correctly registered to the system and the ticket is generated correctly, then the user can use the ticket correctly. The second case is if the system is set up correctly, its entity in this system registered to the system correctly, and it is generated correctly, then the user can be de-anonymized and traced. So this is the correctness provided by our scheme. For the security, we give the formal security model by using 3 games. This game defined between a challenger and the the adversary. The first game is named the Unlinkability game. This game is developed to protect the user's privacy. Even if verifier and other user include, they cannot provide a user's whole service information. The second game is named the Unforceability game. This game is used to define the unforceability of the ticket. Even if user verifier under the central verifier include, they cannot forge a ticket. The third game is named the Traceability game. Even if user verifier and central verifier include, they cannot generate a ticket which is linked to a user who has never obtained a ticket or a user who is not the real owner of the ticket. Actually, this traceability property is from the group signature. So if the user, in other words, if the user is the real owner of the ticket, the user can be anonymized and traced. We give the full definition of these three games. If you are interested in the definition, you can find the detail in our paper. So this is the security model under the formal definition. To construct our scheme, we need to use some basic crypto preliminary. Our scheme was constructed on the bilinear map, bilinear group, especially in the asymmetric bilinear groups. As you know, bilinear group can be classified as three different types. The first type is symmetric, where G1 and G2 are the same group. However, both type 2 and type 3 are asymmetric pairing. In type 2, there is a map from G2 to G1. And however, in type 3, this map is not required. Among these three kinds of pairing, type 3 pairing are most efficient. So we construct our scheme based on the type 3 pairing. To prove the security of our scheme, we use the following complexity assumption. The first one is Q-substantive Harman assumption. The second one is the DUC version, sorry, Q-substantive Harman assumption. The third one is the decision-native Harman assumption, and the last one is the discrete logarithm assumption. We can reduce the security of our scheme to these complexity assumptions. To protect the user's privacy, we use zero-knowledge proof technology. Roughly speaking, by using zero-knowledge proof, a prover can convince the verifier that he knows a secret without revealing the secret to the verifier directly. Here we follow the definition given by Kamnis and Staller. By using this formulation, we denote the prover will prove that he knows the knowledge alpha, beta, gamma to the verifier. All the elements in the parentheses alpha, for example, alpha, beta, gamma are the secret which the prover is proving, and all other parameters are publicly known to the verifier. So we will follow this definition and use zero-knowledge proof to protect the user's privacy in our scheme. In our scheme, we use this special signature, BBS plus signature, to generate credential and issue ticket to users. This signature was proposed by all, etc., and has some good features. The first feature is this signature can be used to send a blocker of messages instead of only one message. For example, by using this signature scheme, the sender can send a blocker message M1, M2, and MN. And also, there another important feature. There is an efficient protocol which can be used to prove that a user has obtained the signature from the sender without showing the signature to the verifier directly. So this is quite important property used to protect the user's privacy. As the important feature, this signature also enable the signature owner to selectively release the message. For example, the user can control which message can be released to the verifier. So this is quite an important feature used to construct our anonymous synchronous system. So we have mentioned all the preliminary used to construct our scheme. Now we can. Now I would like to introduce the construction of our scheme. As mentioned before, in our scheme, a central authority is required to set up the system. So at the beginning, the central authority set up the system by generating the asymmetric bilinear map. Then the central authority needs to generate the master secret key and the corresponding master public key. And also the central authority needs to select two different hash functions. Finally, the central authority public parameters to all the users in this system. The public parameters include the bilinear map information and some generators in the two groups, G group 1 and group 2, and also the hash function information. So this is the setup algorithm and run by the central authority. So the second algorithm in our scheme is the registration algorithm. This algorithm is executed between an entity and the central authority. The entity includes users, ticket issuer, ticket verifier, and the central verifier. For each entity in the system, you need first generate a secret key and compute the corresponding public key. Then this entity can use his identity and the public key to register to the central authority. Then the central authority can issue a credential to this entity by generating a BBS signature on the public key of this central authority. This signature sigma E is the BBS signature on the entity's public key. So because BBS signature enables users to prove that he has obtained this signature to the verifier, so this can be used to protect the user's privacy. In our scheme, the user, the ticket issuer, ticket verifier and the central verifier are required to register to the central authority and obtain credentials from the central authority. After registering to the central authority, a ticket user can buy a ticket. When buying a ticket, the user first select a set of service provider identity, and to form a site GU, this consists of the identity of the selected service provider, and include a special identity, which is the identity of the central verifier. For each selected service provider, the user needs to generate a pseudonym for this selected service provider, PU and QV. Actually, the PV and QV is the encryption of a user's public key under the central verifier's public key. So this is the ECMA encryption of a user's public key under the central verifier's public key. So in future, the central verifier can use his secret key to decrypt this ciphertext and know the user's public key information. After this, the user needs to generate a proof that he has obtained a credential from the central authority and prove the knowledge included in the pseudonym. Then the user needs to send both this proof and the selected service provider's identity information to the ticket issuer. The ticket issuer works as follows. At the beginning, the ticket issuer will verify whether the proof is correct or not. If it's correct, this ticket issuer will go to the next slide. For each selected service provider, the ticket issuer will generate a special tag for this selected service provider. This ticket, this tag consists of some elements. Here, DV is the search in text of the tag. The PVQV is the user pseudonym for this selected service, and the EVFV is department which can be verified by the service provider by using his secret key. And the EVKV is the ECMA encryption of the service provider public key under the central verifier's public key. So in the future, the central verifier can use his secret key to decrypt the ciphertext and know the selected service provider information. After this, the service provider calculates the tag serial number by hash. Then the service provider calculated the tag serial number, which is the hash value of all elements included in the tag. Then the ticket issuer generates a signature for this tag serial number. In other words, any party cannot generate a valid tag except the central, except the ticket issuer. Here, the search index DV is generated by using the selected service provider identity and the secret value CU selected by the ticket issuer. So this is the tag for each selected service provider and can only be verified by the selected service provider. To prevent can be used in different ticket, the ticket issuer generates the ticket serial number, which is the hash value of all the tag serial number, X1, X2, and XGU. Then the ticket issuer generates a signature on this ticket serial number. Finally, the ticket is generated like this. The ticket consists of different tag. Each tag is for a selected service provider, and including this ticket serial number and the signature on this ticket serial number. In other words, a user cannot combine two different tickets, because for each ticket there is a ticket serial number and the signature for this ticket serial number. So this is the ticket issue algorithm. As a result, to access multiple services, a user only need to obtain one ticket from the ticket issuer. The second feature is a user can obtain the ticket anonymously instead of releasing her personally identifiable information to the ticket issuer, because the user proved that he is legal user in this system because he has obtained a credential from the central authority. So this is the feature provided by the ticket issue algorithm in our scheme. The third algorithm in our scheme is ticket verification. When using a ticket, the user needs first search the tag. First search the index for the tag, because the user knows the service provider identity and they got these secret values from the ticket issuer. So the user can first calculate this search index. This can be calculated very efficiently. Then the user can use this search index to search the tag for the designated verifier. After this, the user can generate a proof that he knows the knowledge included in the pseudonym, which is for the selected service provider. Then the user sends the corresponding tag and the proof to the designated verifier. The verifier will first check whether this tag has been used or not. If this tag has been used, the verifier will stop the authentication. Otherwise, the verifier will go to the next step. If the tag has not been used, the verifier will check whether the proof is correct or not. If the proof is correct, which means the user is the owner of the ticket, the verifier will check whether the user is authorized to access his service or not by checking whether FV and EV is the diffie-Hellman pair by using his secret key. If this equation holds, which means the user is authorized to access his service, then the verifier will check whether this tag is generated by the ticket issuer or not by validating the signature on the tag serial number SV. If this signature is correct, which means the tag is generated by the ticket issuer and the user is authorized to access the service managed by the service provider. If all this success, the verifier or the service provider will grant the service to the user. Otherwise, it will deny the access request. So this is the ticket verification algorithm in our scheme. This algorithm can also provide some features. The first feature is the verifier can determine whether a user is authorized to access its service or not by verifying whether EVFA is the defilement pair or not by using his secret key. But the verifier cannot link a user service request if multiple users include, because for different verifier, the user is using different pseudonym. So, because the user just proof that he generated this pseudonym, so the service provider cannot link the user's service request. The second feature is the verifier can detect and prevent double spending a ticket, but cannot de-anonymous the user. The verifier can know whether the attack has been used or not by checking the log, but cannot de-anonymize user. So this is the second feature provided by the ticket verification algorithm. The fourth algorithm in our scheme is the ticket trace algorithm. This algorithm works as follows. In the case, if the user needs to be de-anonymized and traced, the central verifier can use his secret key to de-anonymize user and trace all her service request as follows. After obtaining this ticket from the user, the central verifier can trace the user's service request as follows. For each tag included in the ticket, the central verifier can use his public key, can use his secret key to decrypt the subtext PV and QV, which is the encryption of a user's public key under the central verifier's public key. So the central verifier can use his secret key to decrypt the PV and QV and know the user's public key. And also because the KV and the EV is the encryption of this selected service provider's public key under the central verifier public key. So the central verifier can use his secret key to decrypt the subtext and know the public key of the selected service provider. So from each tag, the central verifier can know the user public key and the selected service provider public key. To verify whether this tag is generated by a ticket the issue or not, the central verifier just calculate the tag serial number and check whether this tag is generated by the ticket issuer by verifying the signature. If this signature is correct, which means the tag is generated by the ticket issuer and the service is selected by the user. To check whether all the service has been found or not, the central verifier will calculate the ticket serial number, which is the hash value of all the tag serial number, and then we'll check whether the signature for this ticket serial number is correct or not by verifying this equation. If this equation holds, which means all the service selected by the user has been found, and all the service has been authorized by the ticket issuer. So by using this algorithm, the central verifier can de-anonymize user and also find all the services selected by the user. So this is the ticket trace algorithm in our scheme. Especially this ticket trace algorithm enable the central verifier to de-anonymize a user and trace all the service selected by the user. So this is the ticket trace algorithm. This is the whole construction of our scheme. We based our scheme on the asymmetric pairing group, and use the BBS plus signature to generate a ticket on the credential. For the security, as mentioned, we developed 3 game. We proved the security of our scheme in the proposed game. The first security property is unlinkability. We can prove that the proposed new anonymous single sign system is selectively unlinkable. This security property can be reduced to the DDH assumption. The second security property is unforceability property. This is for the ticket. The proposed anonymous single sign system is unforceable. This property is reduced to the GOC version Q-strong Harman assumption. And the last security property is the traceability. This security property can be reduced to the Q-strong Harman assumption and the discrete logarithm assumptions. This is the security property provided by our scheme. We also implement our scheme. When implementing our scheme, we use some tools. We use the benchmarking framework. This was developed by our project, and it can be found on this public link. And because our scheme was constructed on the asymmetric bilinear map, bilinear group, so we use type F curve to implement our scheme. This curve is provided by the GPPC library. For other crypto function, for example, hash function, we use the Banchi-Casio library. When implementing our scheme, we consider 2-level security, a 16-bit security, and the 320-bit security. For example, to generate 2 tags and 3 tags with 160-bit security, the time consumed by the ticket issue algorithm are as follows. So this is only for the ticket issuer algorithm. This table summarizes all the time consumed by a different algorithm in our scheme. For example, 160-bit security level on the 2 tags, 106-bit security and 3 tags, and also 320-bit security 2 tag and 320-bit security 3 tags. So this table gave the time consumed by different algorithm. For example, setup, registration, issue, ticket verification, and also the tracing algorithm. So this is the implementation of our scheme. Finally, I would like to summarize this presentation. In this presentation, I mainly introduced a new anonymous single sign system this system can provide some new features. Especially, we formalized the definition security model of the proposed scheme, and also we gave the formal construction. And we also proved the security by reduce the different property to different well-known complexity assumptions. In the future, we will consider to extend our scheme. The first future work is to extend our scheme to support flexible policy, flexible verification. For example, if the designated verifier is unavailable, so we need to consider to the proxy verification. The second future work is to develop a more efficient scheme by using attribute-based credential, which enable user with different attributes to buy different tickets. So this is our second future work. So that's all of my presentation today. Thank you very much for your time and your attention. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, sir. Devasis Gir, sir, are you there?
Sorry, I saw there may be some question in the QA. Let me check. Okay.
Any question from the participant?
Okay. I saw there's question. I have a question in crypto mean. This question is very. Okay.
Yes,
Maybe
Mr.
I missed
Anik
some
Chakravarti, you can
question.
ask the question.
Yeah.
Either you can type it in the chat box or you can post it in the QA section. Yes, Mr. Anik Chakravarti, if you have any question, please post it in the chat box. Otherwise, post it in the question answer section. So Devasis sir, I think Han sir has completed his PPT.
So you can raise your hand also.
Yes.
So there is no question probably. So thank you, Dr. Han, for your valuable speech, and that is very informative, and that will be helpful to our participants. Thank you, Dr. Han.
Thank you. Thank you.
So now our next speaker, Vipindev Adat. He received Bachelor of Technology in Electronics and Communication Engineering from government Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Technology in 2014, and Master of Technology in Computer Engineering on Cybersecurity from Department of Computer Engineering in National Institute of Technology, Kurukshetra, Haryana in 2017. He is currently working as a researcher and Mary Squid Fellow in the Wireless Technology Telecommunication Laboratory of the Department of Electronics and Computer Engineering, University of Patras, Greece, and a PhD student in the University of Vigo from Spain. His research interests include but not limited to network security, network coding, 5G, small cell network, Internet of Things. Vipindev is active member of the IEEE and author of more than 10 papers in the reputed journals and international conference. Now, Vipin will present today on the topic blockchain. The title of the presentation is Blockchain Enhanced Secure Network Coding for 5G and Beyond. So, Vipin Dev, you are welcome to start your presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Debashish. I think you can see my screen now. The presentation.
Yes, sir. Yes, it is visible.
Yes.
It is.
Okay. So, Maulana Abdul Kalam Azhar University to have me here for the session, and it was a very wonderful session from Dr. Han and Jeffro. I'm glad to be here. As you know, I'm still a PhD student, so maybe we will have a bit more interactive section. I'm going to present my work, which is part of a European Union Horizon 2020 project called SECRET, Secure Network Coding for Reduced Energy Next Generation Small Cells, on where my specific work is actually on the blockchain enhanced secure network coding for 5G and beyond networks. On this hand, so today we are going to have discussions mainly on network coding. What is network coding? I think maybe many of you have already heard, already have an idea of network coding and its principles. And then going to the security concerns, homomorphic authentication integrity schemes, and how the blockchain enhanced integrity scheme works in the proposed scenario. So network coding, maybe some of you have already heard of it. So it's basically the idea of coding packets on the fly. Traditionally, what we do is, if we consider a hop by hop network, a router or an intermediate node will just receive a packet and send it to the next one, or it is called the store and forward mechanism, where you just receive a packet and forward to the next node. But in network coding, what we consider is, why don't we code the packet? So whatever packets I get, maybe I'm an intermediate node and I'm getting 2 packets from 2 sources, or 2 packets from the same source. So I code this packet and send it to the next node. How this will change the current communication scenario to improve the throughput and increase the reliability and security of the network. So this thought which started sometime in 1970s, which was pushed forward, and around 2000 we had a very innovative paper on network information flow, which actually proposed the idea of network coding. So let's see how it works in the practical scenario. Before to explain that, let me start with a traditional network, which is this topology, which is called butterfly topology, can be used to show the advantages of network coding in the best way. So let's say, okay, we have a source node A, we have 2 destinations F and G. A want to send 2 packets M1 and M2 to F and G. And we have, we consider very ideal scenario. We have all nodes connected properly with a specific channel size, and the channel size is equal to the packet size M1 and M2. So first, what I can do, I can send M1 here, M2 here, and now C got M2. So C store and forward, C forward M2 to the G and the other node like D. Similarly, B forwarded M1 to D and M1 to F. So in these 2 transactions, F already got M1, G already got M2, but now G is waiting for M1 and F is waiting for M2. Meanwhile, D has already got M1 and M2. Now D can send M1 and M2 to E, but it cannot do in a single transaction because of the channel limit. So we have 2 incoming packets here, only 1 outgoing link. So we have a bottleneck. So what we can do, we can serialize the data. First we send M1 or M2 and then send the next one. So this bottleneck issue, where we will need 2 transactions or 2 transmissions to pass the message from D to E. And then once E got both of them, E can actually send it to M2 and M1. Finally, all destination getting all the packets. So we have this bottleneck issue, which somehow reduce the network throughput. And this is where network coding will come to play. Why don't we mix the packet M1 and M2 and send it to E? So that's exactly what the initial network coding papers propose. What we are doing, we mix the packet M1 and M2 here at the D. so that we create a new packet M, which is M1 plus M2. This plus is, let's say it's a bitwise XOR, so that M is M1 XOR M2. Now D can send M1 and M1 XOR M2 because when you, as you know, like X, while you do an XOR operation, you get the output with the same size. So by receiving two packets of size EM, D currently have only a single packet which is of size M, which can be sent in a single transmission from D to E. Now E received M, E sent it to F and G. At G, now he got M2 and M, but M is M1 XOR M2. So if you think of it, M2 XOR M1 XOR M2 will give you M1. Similarly here, M1 XOR M1 XOR M2 will give you M2. So what we did a coding, or we combined the packets here, send it over, and at the receiving node, we decoded this packet to get actual information what we have. This way we are improving the throughput of the network. So basically, if somebody asks what is network coding, I will give this is network coding and how we enhance this throughput by using network coding principles. But this scenario is not that easy because okay, currently we can do that just because we know F will already receive M1 from B2, or G will already receive M2 from C. But if you consider a wireless scenario or a mobile ad hoc network scenario, this awareness of state, awareness of network communication, network situations will not be there. So the previous scheme what we were saying was a state-aware protocol, a state-aware network coding protocol, which used the local information and network state information to do the encoding process. There is an example called COP, which is a network coding protocol, which is state-aware. On the other hand, if we don't know about the network structure, or if we want to address a network which is mobile or wireless, volatile, in that case, this kind of a scenario will not be that possible. So we want to go for stateless network coding protocol, where the protocol is independent of the network structures and situation. One of the major examples of stateless network coding protocol is called random linear network coding. So what we are going to do in random linear network coding is we code the packets with using some linear coefficients, and we send linear combinations of these packets. I will show you in the next slide. And this actually works in a wireless and lossy network very well. And also the random linear network coding introduced a, now we can decode the packets with any sufficient number of packets. We don't depend on what packets the other way we are getting. Let's see how it works. A very basic example with the same topology. Even though network coding, RLNC is not topology dependent, I am going to explain it with the same butterfly topology just for easiness. So we have two packets here, X1 and X2. Instead of sending X1 and X2 directly, what we are going to do is we add a coefficient A1 and A2 and A3 and A4 and do a matrix multiplication. So a 1 by 2 matrix into a 2 by 1 matrix, we get a single one element matrix in the end, A1 X1 plus A2 X2 equal to Y1. Similarly here, A3 X1, A4 X2 equal to Y2. So now instead of sending X1 and X2, we are going to send Y1 and Y2 to both the nodes. From here, since there is no other packet, we forward Y2, we forward Y2 to D as well. B will forward Y1 to F, B will also forward Y1 to D. At D, now we have got two equations like A1 X1 plus A2 X2 equal to Y1, A3 X1 plus A4 X2 equal to Y2. So when you have two equations with two variables, you can actually decode it using some matrix, inverse matrix and all. That is called the matrix Gaussian elimination method in matrix multiplication. I'm pretty sure many of you already know how easy or how it to be done that. So that way at D, we can actually decode x1 and x2 separately and then code it with another set of variable, a locally generated random linear coefficients B1 and B2. Now, what D going to send to E is B1 x1, B2 x2 plus B2 x2 equal to Y. So we started with sending, we want to give x1 and x2 to F and G, but we are actually sending Y1, Y2 and Y. But the beauty is when F is actually going to get this Y and Y1, it can decode and get x1 and x2 by applying the same type of Gaussian multiplication, a Gaussian elimination process. Similarly at G can actually decode x1 and x2 from y2 and y using the Gaussian elimination. So here we don't choose A1 or A2 by any particular values. It can be completely randomly chosen by the by each node. Also, it doesn't depend. We have to get. We don't remember that y2 should be received here through this line. It may be received through here also, or it may be received through any other connection. So in that way, we don't now focus on the network state when it comes to random linear network coding. Okay, so how it is done in a real scenario? Because currently we are talking about 2 packets, and in a real life scenario, we will have like multiple packets with multiple packet sizes and all. So if we say like there are 1,000 packets, then it may not be a wise idea to have a do a Gaussian elimination of 1,000 into 1,000 size matrix, because it have a lot of computational complexity and you had a lot of packets in the side. So in that way, for a real scenario, what we're going to do is we divide a message to a number of generations. Let's say we have a 1,000 packets to send. So what we do, we divide these 1,000 packets to generations of 10 packets each. And in generalization, we have m packets in a generation. So in the example, I'm saying like 1,000, 10, 100. So we have 10 packets in a single generation, and we have 100 generations like that. And now we are going to do the same process per generation. So in that case, what we are going to have is like we have a message P1, P2, P3 up to M. It's a generation, it's a single generation, where each packet Pi is a vector element of n size, Pi1, Pi2 up to Pin in a Gaussian field. We do all these operations in a Gaussian field while working. And this packet can now be augmented with a unit vector of dimension m. Why dimension m? So let's say we have 2 packets. Our generation size or m is 2 now. So to code 2 packets, we saw that we needed 2 elements. So we will have 2 elements for each element, each packet. So this can be a unit initially at the source node. We don't encode actually. So it is going to be very simple unit vectors 1, 0, 0, 1. And then we code this packet by multiplying, doing a matrix multiplication of this coefficient matrix to the packets or original or native packets. And by doing this multiplication, we do the encoding process. We combine these, and these values will change. Okay, if we consider a unit vector, it will not change. But if we consider any value, it will change. But now we go to coded words, where each coded word is of size m plus n, and each coded or coded generation or augmented generation will be of size m into m plus n, because m number of packets with each packet of size m plus n. So we will get a augmented generation of size m into m plus n. This is what we are going to send to the next node. So source node did this multiplication and got the augmented matrix, send it to the intermediate node, And while intermediate node receive a complete encoder generation, it can decode the packet. So this was encoding. We did encoding and we received these 2 packets. So the intermediate node actually now can decode. If it only received 1 packet, it cannot decode because still we have only 1 equation, but with 2 variables. So we cannot do that. But when we get 2, we can decode. That's why we are saying when there is enough number of innovative packets, it can decode or it can actually recode also. What we do in recoding is this. We don't do this part, but what we are going to do, we are going to multiply the same coded vector with a locally generated random coefficient. So if I am in recording node or an intermediate node, I got 2 packets, and then I'm not going to decode it, but I will multiply those packets with some locally generated random coefficient of the same size as the coefficient matrix, which will be nm into m matrix. So this way we send it to the next node, and whenever there are enough number of packets, we can do the Gaussian elimination to do the decoding. And the decoding, as we were seeing, is the way of separating this coefficient matrix and the original packet, or getting the original packet back from the coefficient matrix. And now our main question is whether this original packet will be genuine or not. This integrity check, whether what we got after decoding is going to be the original packet that sent by a source, is a bit tricky, or this is something what we have to do, or this is what we are actually focusing on by the integrity schemes that applies to the network coding. I'm going to explain how we do this check later. And if this doesn't happen, we say there is some security issue, which is called pollution attack. So till now, I was just giving an example or a basic idea of what random linear network coding means, and how network coding can be used for the message sending, or to change the current way of communication. With network coding, we have some major advantages. First one is throughput, as we explained from the very basic scenario. Whenever there are bottlenecks, or whenever there are requirements of mismatching between the number of packets to be sent and the channel size, network coding can actually help. And in a multicast scenario, network coding gives a benefit of average throughput proportional to root n, an increase in the average throughput. Second one, we reduce the number of transmissions in the system. For example, if you remember, instead of sending M1 and M2 separately, we are going to send a single message Y, or M1 plus M2. So we reduce the number of transmissions, thus reducing the energy requirement. The third part is reliability. And reliability comes with two ideas. Now, what we are going to have is, in network coding principles, since we are coding the packets, any source node, if it has like all the native packets, it can make multiple number of coded packets. For example, if I choose, okay, like A1 and A2, A3 and A4 in the initial example. So you can choose any number of values here, just that these A1, A2 and A3, A4 are that metric should be linearly independent. So in that way, you can actually create multiple number of code words and send it to all the nodes, whatever you have. And a receiver will need to get any of these innovative code words. It doesn't matter if I get a single packet came to a particular channel, I should get it only from the another channel. I should get only from a specific channel. No, I can get another code word through any of the channels in the network and decode on my own or recode on my own. So this way we increase the reliability. Even if there is a lossy link where a packet is missing, you don't have any issues. You can get the packet from any other link and you will be able to decode the packet. So this idea actually improves the network performance in a wireless scenario very much, because in wireless scenario, we always have issues of lossy network. Maybe the packets are missing. And if you compare it with the normal TCP communication, where in TCP, we think about sequence communication. So if you are sending 100 packets, you have to send it in the order of 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you miss a packet, let's say 50th packet, then you will have to retransmit from that 58 packet. Then only you can send a 51 packet. But in network coding, it is not at all sequence. So you can send any packet. If you miss a packet, don't worry. Whenever you get a new coded packet, you can actually decode. So this improves the reliability of the network a lot. And these advantages of RLNC led us to the idea of using network coding in a 5G era. When we talk about 5G era, we are talking about like large number of devices, IoT devices, or even high-end devices, which requires high data volume. The network requires high throughput and energy efficiency. To address all these challenges, we have proposed in secret, in our project, we have proposed this idea of network coding enabled mobile small cells, where we envision a heterogeneous small cell environment. Heterogeneous in the sense we will have multiple devices, let's say mobiles, laptops, sensors, whatever kind of device, we can have all different types of devices. And also the radio access technology, the radio technology for providing services can be different. It can be cellular or Wi-Fi or whatever other technologies they are using. So the small cell environment can be very heterogeneous, but still it will require high data rates at a very low energy. So for this purpose, we use random linear network coding, which is very suitable for the wireless environment in that particular scenario. So this is the scenario what I was talking about. We have small cells. Each small cell have a hotspot connecting to the core network, and the core network is supported by a, let's say, a software-defined controller. And it also have in the 5G technology from the release 13 of 3GPP, we are talking about device-to-device communication. So currently our mobile communication is like when you make a call or when you do some communication, it goes to the base station, it goes to the core network, goes to other base station, and goes to the destination. But in the 5G world, we are also talking about device-to-device communication. So when this source node has to communicate with two destination node here, it can also do it through the other nodes in the network. So he sent a message to here, like that. So different devices in the network, we can do the communication. So it will be a more hop by hop network, hop by hop communication. And this will be a very interesting aspect to study, because now we are not depending on the core network for data transfer. So on this scenario, we are going to analyze how network coding will work and what are the security challenges of implementing network coding in a 5G small cell scenario where device-to-device communication is enabled. So when we talk about security, we have all the different concepts like authentication, confidentiality, integrity, availability, non-repudiation, or eavesdropping, impersonalization. So all these security challenges also exist in the network coding scenarios, but some of them are already inherently addressed in the network coding scenario. For example, let me go back to this figure. So yeah, let's talk about a eavesdropper on this particular channel, a channel from this node to this RN, a relay node. So as per the network coding protocol, we don't send all the packets to the same channel. I mean, a packet may be sent to here, but there is another packet which will go to this one and this one. And from our initial example, if we talk about Y1 send here, and then Y2 will be, Y1 will be sent to this one also. So an eavesdropper here can only get Y1, but just from that particular coded word, he cannot get any data of X1 or X2. He will need to somehow eavesdrop on the other channels as well, so that he can get other coded packets and decode them to get the real message. So some way network coding actually inherits some security schemes. This particular thing is actually studied in a paper which I have added in the references. Maybe you can go in detail. But what I wanted to say was network coding actually provides some inherent security towards eavesdropping. But okay, all these issues, what we were talking, authentication, confidentiality and all, can be addressed in the similar ways as any other wireless network. So we use the normal cryptography schemes. On the other hand, we have some security challenges specific to network coding called pollution attack. The idea here is, okay, as we were mentioning, in network coding, we allow the intermediate node to code or mix the packet and send it. So I'm an intermediate node and I'm an attacker. Here, so I'm an attacker. So I got a packet from here, and instead of coding on that particular packet, let's say I got A and B, then I'm supposed to send A plus B, right? Or a coded value of f of A comma B. Instead of doing that, I add some random noise and I code it with my whatever packet I got and send it. So if that corrupted packet is not detected here, he will mix this corrupted packet with a genuine packet he got from this particular link. So all the packets he will send from here will be corrupted because he has already mixed the corrupted packet. So by corrupting a single link here, as the network progresses, all the communication in the network can be corrupted. So you got the issue of network coding, a security issue of network coding, where an adversary injects a corrupted packet into the network. It can spread across all network, and a single polluted packet can even pollute the entire traffic. So this issue of pollution attack is one of the most studied security challenges in network coding. Another one is entropy attack. In entropy attack, what we are trying to mention, okay, as we were saying, we need linearly independent or innovative packets to decode at the end. But in entropy attack, what an adversary does is he will not send any innovative packet. So if I got A, I will only send A and B. I got A and B. I will only send A, or I will only send A plus B, A plus B, A plus B all the time. I will not change the coefficients so that a receiver will not be able to get a new packet to decode. So this somehow reduces the efficiency of network coding. So this is another major issue in network coding scenarios. We focus in the work which I'm going to explain, we are going to focus on pollution attack. And in pollution attack, there are two types. First one, we corrupt a packet directly. So we corrupt the data of the packet and we send it. So it is called data pollution, which is the most common attack. And there is, to address this issue, what we are going to have is some integrity scheme, which may be based on hashing or signature or max. But whatever we add for the security scheme can also be polluted by an intermediate node. So when they pollute this security addition, let's say a tag, then that is called tag pollution attack. These are the two different types of pollution attack, which maybe it will get more clear when we discuss later. So yeah, there are different security schemes against pollution attacks. It can be information theory based or cryptography based. So in information theory, usually the schemes are based on error correction or cooperative mechanisms in the network. So let's say we trust our neighbors and we take help from them to, you know, find a pollution attack and all. So there are this one part of study which are completely on information theory based, but there is another part of study which is cryptography based, where we use hash functions, signatures, message authentication codes, these kind of integrity schemes to address the pollution attack issue. And why I have homomorphic in all of these addition to all familiar names? Because as we were saying, we are actually not sending the packet directly. So if I have a packet A, I'm going to do a coding function which can be called f of A. So I'm going to send always f of A. So whatever integrity scheme I should implement should be able to decode a packet, decode or verify the packet which has gone through this process of coding. So if I create an integrity scheme over a native packet A, I should be able to verify that packet is A even if it goes through this function f of A. So this idea is called homomorphism. When we are able to do some operation and still verify that, identify the original packet, this idea is called homomorphic property. I think you also know this. This is a very basic idea, maybe in cryptography. So this way we actually can use only homomorphic schemes in the network coding scenarios. So that's why we have only homomorphic based schemes here. And in that schemes, we generally go for the initial proposals were based on hashing schemes, where we create a homomorphic hash on the packet and share this hash through a secure channel to the receiving nodes. This will ensure the on-the-fly verification, but still we will need a secure channel from the source to all the participation nodes in the network. This can be really tricky in a wireless scenario, and it is also very expensive in terms of computation. The other schemes which we have is homomorphic signature based schemes, where the nodes are able to sign on any linear combination of a set of packets. So I have a set of packets in a generation, let's say m packets in a generation of m, and then we make a signature on these m packets and send it, and this signature should be able to verify the integrity of packets of any linear combination, so that it will support the homomorphic property. The security can actually depend on discrete logarithm or Diffie-Hellman, like Han was saying, because these are very secure or strong strong cryptographic problems. We always discuss discrete logarithm or decision Diffie-Hellman, these kind of schemes. So there are security schemes based on this, but and it will not need an extra secure channel. We can add these signatures to the packet and send it, but it will require a key. In terms of signature, we will require a public-private key to be shared between the source and destination, like any other signature scheme. And then there are another type of integrity scheme, which is called homomorphic Mac, where we rely on message authentication codes. And the major difference between Mac and signatures are, in Mac we use symmetric keys. So whatever key I am having, the source node should also have the same set of keys, so that it can do the same operation and decode it. In terms of signature, if you think of the signature schemes, mostly the source node will have to do a multiplication, and the receiver node may have to do a exponentiation or like factorization. So there will be different operations done by the public key and private key. But in terms of Mac, we will have the same kind of operation done by the same set of keys. Here the problem is we will have to share the same set of keys to every node. So let's say an adversary also have all the keys, then adversary can actually pollute the packet and change the, create new tags. So there will be a tag pollution attack because adversary changed the packet, but it also changed the tags so that the integrity scheme will not detect a pollution. So this issue needs to be addressed through different schemes. There are some schemes which talk about different key distribution mechanism. So as a source node, I will have like a large number of keys, but I will not give the same set of keys to all the participation nodes. So let's say, yeah, you guys are different participating nodes in the network. So I will give only a set of keys to each person. So you can only verify that number of tags. I will have, let's say now we have something like 70 participants. So as a source, I have 70 keys. I give one key to each of you, and I add 70 tags on the packet. So each one of you can only verify one tag, which is enough to ensure the security. But if you wanted to pollute the packet and add a new tag, you cannot do that because the other guy is having another key. So you don't know his key. So you cannot actually, pollute a packet and cheat make the next node pass through the verification process. So this is one way of key distribution. But if you consider, let's say if we have 70 people, then we have 70 tags on top. Each one is verifying only one tag. So we have a very high computational or bandwidth overhead, but the security is very less because each one of you can verify only one tag. So there is a mismatch between the bandwidth overhead and the security. Also, if you talk about a very large or dense network where there are thousands of nodes, these numbers are going to be very huge, and which is not practically possible. This is where we try to think of a integrity scheme which can be based on the which is based on the homomorphic Mac actually, but then it is scalable with the network. So as we are talking, we have huge computation overhead and key management overhead and scalability issues. These are the major issues what we have in the cryptography based schemes at the moment while addressing it to the network coding scenario or a 5G scenario. So we are trying to propose a scheme which will be scalable and have a better matching, better trade-off between the security and the band overhead. For that purpose, we introduced or we considered a blockchain-based integrity scheme. This figure is very much similar to the one which you saw before. So we have a source node here, sending packets to two destination nodes or through different channels communication. And each small cell head is actually part of a blockchain. And so each small cell head is a blockchain node as well. It does all the other functionalities as a hotspot, but it is also part of a blockchain node. So based on this scenario, we are going to explain how our scheme is going to work. So what we are going to do, we have the well-known, the first initial homomorphic Mac-based scheme called HomoMac. From there, we modify the homomorphic message authentication code part proposed by HomoMac by to match our scenario, and create a Mac that is homomorphic to the linear operations as per the random linear network coding principle. And then we have a blockchain network. What exactly we are going to do? We create the Mac at the source node. We are going to send this Mac as a transaction to the blockchain or store it in the blockchain so that any other node can verify what was the original Mac created by the source node at any receiver node. And here, we are not talking about the blockchain as a like a Bitcoin blockchain or anything. We consider a distributed, secure database. That's the idea of our blockchain. So there are few points I will have to discuss about the blockchain part in the end. So just now consider we have a secure distributed ledger where we store the Macs. And how the Macs are created? Macs are created using the okay. I think I have a question, but maybe I will answer it a bit later after the presentation. Okay. So before that, let's stick to the plan at the moment. So we have this Macs created with the help of these pre-distributed keys. And this is the equation for creating the Mac or the tag. So when we have a packet of PI with a key of size, let's say n+1 nodes, n+1 elements, then this is the equation for creating the tag, which is actually from the previous paper which I was mentioning, HomoMac. And by creating such a single tag, we will ensure the security. And if we have L number of tags, each tag can provide us a security of 1 by Q, where Q is the field size of our all operations. That is the Gaussian field, let's say 2⁸. So if we have one just single tag, we will have a 1 by Q probability of a polluted packet passing through our scenario. But if we have L number of tag, we will have a much lower probability, which can be like 1 by Q⁻L. Because what is the probability of a polluted packet passing through is a probability of finding a single symbol in the Gaussian field that will be able to create the same tag as what is the original tag. And this probability is actually depending on the field size, which is Q, so 1 by Q. And if we have multiple tags, that many elements should be identified. So we will have 1 by Q into 1 by Q. So if there are L tags, it's going to be 1 by Q⁻L. So this is the security of our integrity scheme. And the proposed security scheme, how it works will be like this. So we have source nodes and receiving node and the blockchain network. We share a same set of keys with all the nodes. We have the packets. We created a tag on the native packet, added to the packet, also stored it to the blockchain. Now we consider it as a normal packet. We encode, we create the coded vector, and to be careful, we don't distinguish between the packet or the tag anymore. We just consider it as a normal network coding packet and code it. So now this coded vector will be sent to the receiving node. Once the receiving node get it through the communication channel, it need to verify whether the we have the coefficient matrix, whether the packets it received and the tags are the original ones sent by the source node. So what it can do, first to check the tag pollution, it can verify whether this tag matches with the tag that is stored in the network, because this one is actually directly stored by the source node. So it is original tag. So by receiving a coded vector, a receiving node can actually verify the integrity of the tag by comparing the tag it received through the communication channel and the tag that is stored in the blockchain. Once it is done, we come to know, okay, there is no tag pollution attack, and the receiver actually have the same set of key. So it can actually verify the data pollution. It can verify the integrity of the packet by doing the same operation what a source node have done here, creating the tags as per the equation what we saw. So by doing these two operations, we actually verify for both tag pollution and data pollution attack. This proposed scheme, how it works in a receiver node, is actually shown as a block flowchart here. So while receiving a packet from channel, it retrieves the corresponding tags from blockchain, verify the tags. If there is no tag pollution attack, it goes to the create tags for the received packet using the MAC algorithm, and then verify whether these new tags are matching with the tags it received. And if the verification is success, we don't have any data pollution attack as well. So this is basically the idea of our security scheme. And as I was saying, we mentioned about a blockchain part here. And I want to be clear about it, because it's not a blockchain which will need a very large computational expenses to create a block verification. We use BigchainDB, which is a blockchain-based distributed database, to store the store and share the max in our simulation. BigchainDB is a proof of stake based algorithm to create the block validation. It uses Tendermint's BFT, Byzantine fault tolerance algorithm, to create, to achieve the consensus. And it is a proof of stake based mechanism. And I think maybe you are already aware, but maybe I will just talk about proof of work and proof of stake, the differences. In proof of work, the block validation is actually focused based on a creation of a very huge, solving a huge computational issue or computational problem. But on proof of stake, we don't compete for creating this or solving the computational problem, but we will decide a node to solve or to verify a particular particular block, depending on the in the stakes it have in the blockchain. Let's say if it is about the cryptocurrency scenario, let's say whoever is having a high cryptocurrency value is the one who can do the block verification, because if he does something wrong, he is going to have bigger loss. So depending on the stake what every participant have in the network, we will allow particular users to do the verification. So there are different ways. Then there are federation based learning. Then there are proof of elapsed time based consensus. So there are different types. In our scheme, since we cannot go for a high computational problem, so we choose something which is based on proof of stake. That is the Tendermint's BFT based algorithm. And another important factor why we choose for BigChain DB is because it provides you a facility that any node, even if it is not a blockchain node, it can actually query the verified blocks in the blockchain using a metadata. A metadata is something we add as a name, let's say, or as a identifier to the particular block. So any participating node can verify, can query the verified block using a metadata and access the values in the verified block. In our particular scenario, in our working example, we have the metadata as the generations number and the source ID of the packet it receives. So if I am an intermediate node, I received a packet, a generation of let's say 10th generation from a source of, let's say, an ID 40. So I will query the blockchain to get what is the data tag stored by source ID 14 for the particular generation number 10. And then I get it and I do the verification part. In this way, we efficiently secure the network coding scenario against data pollution and tag pollution attack. We are able to identify the malicious packet in the very first genuine node. Also, this example or the proposed integrity scheme work efficiently against a colluding attackers. When there are multiple attackers, still we will be able to manage it, because even if there are multiple attackers around, doesn't matter. I always verify it through the blockchain. There can be only one issue when there are more than 51%, more than 50% of attackers in the network. So the blockchain can be manipulated. So this is another issue, but that means we have more attackers in the network than a genuine node. So this scenario is very rare. Otherwise, if the blockchain data is not modified, our integrity scheme is secure and intact for any genuine node in the network. So that's how we say the proposed scheme is efficient against colluding attackers. And yeah, I think that's more or less about the presentation side. And as a conclusion, I would like to say this because, yeah, if 5G paradigm is still accepting proposals and there are going on research proposals on the high throughput, resilience and ultra low latency communication and all. And the proposed secure network coding mobile small cells, what we were discussing now, is actually not ultra low latency. So it doesn't work with the ultra low latent communication, but it works more with content distribution, and it is more suitable for content distribution and multi MMTC level of communications, massive machine type communications. On the other hand, this proposed approach is scalable to a very large number of nodes in the network. It is robust against colluding attackers. And an ongoing work, what we are currently doing is how to use this blockchain-based scenario to also use key management and provide proper authentication or a easier authentication to all the nodes in the network. these are some maybe some research directions or yeah, future work I or you guys can do. So I think that's more or less about the presentation. These are the few references of our major works mentioned in the paper. Thank you for listening. And if there are any questions, maybe we should. So okay, I have few questions here. Shall I go on, Debashish? Hello. Yeah. So the first one was okay.
You can
Yes. Sorry. Hello. Okay. So maybe
you can give the answer.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. So the first one is about the coding and decoding at the intermediate node. The question is it necessary to decode the intermediate nodes while recoding? Actually, it is not. As we were discussing that part, maybe I missed a bit, but yeah. The idea is here, let's say I have a coded packet here. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So let's say these are two coded vectors, coded packets, and I receive these coded packets at the intermediate node. The intermediate node actually don't have to do the decoding part, but what it can do, it can create its own locally generated random vectors, a random coefficients of the same size in the sense it should be of a matrix of m into m, and then multiply that locally generated random coefficients to the packet it received. So let's say here we will have another m into m matrix. It will be multiplying to all the both code weights, not only this part, not only the packet part, but to the whole code weight and send over. So as a as an intermediate node, what I will do is, if I get a message, I will create a random coefficient on my own and multiply the whole code weight with this particular random coefficient and send over. So in that way, the source node does not have to, sorry, an intermediate node don't have to do the decoding. This is more explained in the network coding papers, which I have mentioned. There is a paper on random linear network coding from Trace Ho. That paper explains how random linear network coding works. And in my own work, which I have mentioned in the references, will explain why this can be done even for the integrity. And another question is about the blockchain. What technology is using for the cryptography part of the blockchain? It is not SHA for this particular big chain DB. I think they are using something from something using ES something. I don't remember exactly the word, but it was not SHA 256. It is actually mentioned in the reference what I was having. There is a white paper on big chain DB. So there are actually two. What I mentioned is the first one, which actually explained whole part, including what type of cryptography they are using. But after that, they have changed. They recently changed some of their schemes, but I think the security part is still going to be the same. The signature part of blockchain is going to be the same. The only change they have made is in the federation, the type of transaction or something. So it's not SHA1, but SHA 256, but I don't remember what exactly it was in there. And then, yeah. Are you considering the problems of centralized controller of SDN, failure of centralized controller in your research scope? Okay. This is something which is very interesting about the SDN part, because as you see, I was in the normal scenario, what we envision in the 5G world, we have a centralized SDN controller here, but still I didn't use this centralized controller and went for a blockchain distributed approach. Why? Because of the same issue. This centralized controller can fail, but let's say it doesn't fail. That's okay. Even if we consider this is very strong and secure, the problem is we wanted to share the tags with this particular node in that case. Actually, initially I studied this part. I have a paper which describes a SDN-based integrity scheme. But the problem is when we communicate with from a source node to the SDN controller through the control channel, we increase the importance of this control channel. Generally, in the SDN related security concern, we will consider the control channel as a very secured one because there is not many data passing through there. So maybe it may not be focused by the attacker. But if we try to share our tags through the controller, we increase the potential chances of attackers in that scenario, in that environment. And this is one reason why we didn't go for a centralized controller. Another one is like failure of a central controller. We didn't want to depend on a single single entity for the security of the scheme. These are the main two reasons why we didn't focus on using SDN, or we dropped the plan of using SDN and going with the distributed ledgers for tag sharing. Still, there are some work we are currently still doing with the SDN, but then we mentioned, okay, there is this chance of a security challenge on the SDN, but there are some applications where we would consider SDN as a very strong, secure, centralized entity. So yeah, but mostly the works are going to the distributed side, distributed storage side. And simulating network coding functions in Mininet. Something I forgot to tell you, the simulations what we were doing, we had a BigChain DB architecture it's like a server. We set it up in a server, and for the network coding implementations, we have a very good library called Codo. Codo supports NS3 simulations, NS3 for simulations and emulations, and it also supports C, C++, Python. So you can create modules in C, C++, or Python, and then add it in whatever simulation you want. So that's how we can simulate network coding scenarios in different simulators. But currently I'm doing it with NS3 and then integrating it to BigChain DB through a API, a Postman API, so web-based API. That's one way of doing it. But for Mininet, I think this will be the way to do that. Is there something more which we can discuss?
Any question? Any more question is there from the participant?
Geoffrey has actually addressed the question of Anik about the cryptography, and it's a very nice answer. I mean, yeah.
Hello.
Yep.
Are you getting my voice?
Yes, I think there was one more question. Can we use it in commodity trading? And maybe the question is about either it's about network coding or blockchain principles or blockchain applications. I'm not clear. If it's about blockchain applications, then I think there are different blockchain applications which address a lot of challenges. Maybe commodity trading can be done. And if we talk about network coding is basically if we have any lossy network, or when we have to improve the networking of improve the security of networks, that's where we actually use network coding. So when we have some reliability issues or throughput issues, then to have a better throughput in the network, we can use network coding. So I think the commodity trading question is focusing on the blockchain part, and I think the answer is yes. Maybe somebody else from the speakers, I think Han has worked a lot on blockchain part, so maybe he can address it a bit better. Then yeah, it's about using blockchain in energy sector. There are a lot of work going on in that direction. Even we have seen some purposes where blockchains are used to address vehicular technology, the V2V communication, and provide better authentication and better energy management. There are some proposals on using blockchain for electric vehicles and their storage, the charging points and connectivity, and having this whole system working based on a blockchain application, so that the whatever charging you have done, and there are multiple things, the charging points and their connections, including their payment. So payment can be done through cryptocurrency. There are some works going on in that direction as well. So I think blockchain can be used in that way. How could we secure data in cryptography? Is there any program? Okay, there are multiple answers to this question. There are different types of security programs we have. For example, we can do it by symmetric keys, like what I am doing in Mac. In symmetric key, what we have to do is we have to give the keys to both parties. So Alice and Bob. So Alice have the same key, Bob has the same key, but nobody else know the key. So you do a ciphering, you do a multiplication and send it. But the other way is public key based cryptography, where you have your own private key and you have a public key. You can give the public key to everybody, and then you do a cryptographic operation on your data and send it to the public, and the public, whoever have the public key, can decode it, but they cannot impersonate you. They cannot again code it with your private key. So as a program, there are you can easily find programs of this public key or private key encryptions. You can search for RSA programs in C or C++ or any programming language, Python. Everywhere you can actually find example programs, and then work on that to create your own security scheme. You can change some values. You can set different different security parameters and create your own program. But there are enough number of examples you can find online.
Any question is there?
Yes, sir.
Is there any question?
Sir, one question was in the chat box that is there a scope for side channel attack in NC?
Yeah.
Especially
Okay.
packet are going to pass through multiple paths.
Yes. The side channel attacks. We mainly discuss about side channel attacks when we talk about cloud, right? So we store some data in one part, and there are somebody else having an access to next portion, and it can attack. In network coding, the side channel attack or eavesdropping is somehow not possible, because we are not going to send the whole packet to any particular channel. We send parts to different channels. So no single channel will have all the information. So the side channel attack won't be efficient. Side channel attack, or not even the what we say, eavesdropping on a particular single channel, will not be efficient in a network coding scenario. This is a inherent security, but a very weak security, because if somebody is very strong as an adversary, they can actually eavesdrop on multiple channels. So in that way, it's not a very big security advantage. But if it's a limited security, like a side channel attack, it is not going to affect network coding principle. Network coding somehow inherently stop side channel attacks and all.
So thank you, Bipin.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot for the opportunity and having a good discussion with all of you. It was very nice.
We are thankful to all speakers, Jeffroy and Dr. Jeffroy, Dr. Han, and Mr. Bipin Dev. So thank you very much for your you have spent your valuable time and deliver a speech to our webinar. So anyway, we will later on we will also communicate to you for betterment of the webinar also.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and we are also thankful to the participants for listening their valuable speech, and hopefully their speech will be helpful to your research and to build up career in your future. So thank you all. We will again meet sometimes later.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So
Okay.
Dr. Han and Dr. Jeptoy, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. It's
Thank you
my
very
pleasure
much.
to give a
It was a
presentation
pleasure.
today.
Dr. Jeptoy, thank you very much for
Yeah,
your
thank you
valuable
very much.
speech. And Dr. Han also. So sometimes we can meet in future again.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your valuable speech, and spend your time for our participants and during this COVID-19 situation. So thank you very much. So now we are closing the sessions, and next we are having that some quiz competitions and feedback. So all participants should put your quiz answer of the quiz and put your feedback. So if any announcement from the, we are also thankful to our webinar team members. Mr. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Prem Kumar helped a lot for this
Yes.
webinar.
Thank you, sir.
He has done well for the webinar. So thank you all. Good night.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all, sir.
Okay. Okay.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for participating. Sir, these are the feedback link, quiz link, and e-certificate links. And it is requested to all participants to kindly take note of this link. And the quiz will be active for half an hour. And after giving the feedback and quiz, after 2 hours, the certificate will be able to be downloaded from this link. So please note down the link or take the screenshot of the link. And we request our valuable speakers to kindly please log out, and we will be ending the session within 2-3 minutes. These are the quiz link.
We can leave now, Jeffroy and Dr. Han.
Yes, sir.
So we will meet sometimes later. Dr. Han.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Okay. See
you
you.
very much.
Bye.